everybody's screaming and yelling in the streets that in Harvard and Columbia, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So they're half right. From the river to the sea, Israel will be free. That's really where we need to go. Israel needs to have sovereignty over its God-given land. Israel should have sovereignty over this land because Israel is the only country that can provide for security and prosperity of all those who inhabit it.
Ambassador Friedman, thank you so much for coming to National Religious Broadcasters. You're here for a very specific reason.
Yeah, I mean, as this unfolded, and as the president and the Secretary of State began to speak more and more about a two-state solution and how important it is, I'm thinking the world's just upside down, right? I mean, who's going to be living in this second state? By the way, it's the third state, right? Because as you and I know, 72% of mandatory Palestine was given to Jordan. That's the original Palestinian state. So we're going to give a second Palestinian state now to people, more than 80% of whom are glorifying and exalting Hamas for beheading, brutalizing, raping, murdering Jewish civilians. So this is as crazy as anything I've ever heard in my life in the world of politics.
Well, in 2005, a very controversial decision, which I disagreed with, but okay, it was made. Then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon decided to completely withdraw all Israeli forces, all Israeli civilians, 9,000, out of Gaza and say, there you go. You can have it. Govern yourselves, build your own community. You've got beachfront property on the Mediterranean. You've got natural gas right offshore. Mm-hmm. Go build a Palestinian paradise. We don't want to govern your lives. What happened? An absolute hellhole was created.
So
isn't that a test of how a Palestinian would be?
You and I
would go in a bad direction.
I think you and I would have predicted that outcome either way, but I think
Netanyahu did predict it.
Yes.
He and Natan Shresky said it will become a Hamas-stan. It will become a terror base camp.
Right. So now we know with certainty, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're looking back on it, and we know that notwithstanding giving them their own territory, self-governance, lots of money, valuable real estate.
Right.
Okay, they turned it into a terror state. So we know it doesn't work.
Right.
We know with certainty. It's no longer a hypothetical.
But there's two examples. So Gaza, one disastrous example. We give the land and we get a terror state. But the Palestinian Authority itself, you'd say, okay, Israel made a very controversial decision then with the Oslo Accords, but we gave Yasser Arafat a presidency on the road towards a full sovereign state.
Yeah.
And he turned Judea and Samaria, what they call the West Bank, into a terror base camp. And today, I think Mahmoud Abbas is in his 18th year, I think.
18th year of a four-year term. Yep. And
89% of Palestinians say he's corrupt and should go. So where do we see evidence of Palestinian self-governance that has worked? Like, as a Christian, I want to be compassionate to the Palestinian neighbors. I'm supposed to love my neighbor. That's what Jesus commanded. That's what God commands in Leviticus. I want to love them. I want to show compassion. But I don't see, just rationally, how two examples of self-government have led to something good. Right. It hasn't.
No, it hasn't. And here's what's interesting about now, with all the trauma that Israel has experienced. We're seeing the intersection right now of two complementary views. One is the theological view, and one is the geopolitical view. Right? Theological view has been around forever. Right? We know theologically that God gave this land to the Jewish people. It goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But people said, well, but you can't get there from here because the politics don't work. Right. Well, now we know the politics work, right? Because the Gaza experience tells us that there cannot be a Palestinian state.
So what's your answer? Because a lot of people say, well, if you're against a two-state solution, that means you don't have compassion for Palestinians. And what's your plan? Give me your plan. But you rolled out a plan today.
I did. And so, everybody's screaming and yelling in the streets that in Harvard and Columbia, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So they're half right. From the river to the sea, Israel will be free. That's really where we need to go. Israel needs to have sovereignty over its God-given land. Israel should have sovereignty over this land because Israel is the only country that can provide for security and prosperity of all those who inhabit it, right? Now, it's expensive. The problem has always been, how do you take Jenin and Nablus or Shechem, and Ramallah and make them into places that people want to live?
Yeah.
Well, that's really where the Abraham Accords began. Mm-hmm. That was the long-term vision of the Abraham Accords, that through these relationships and hopefully through some outright help from our wealthy friends in the Gulf, we could create the infrastructure, the schools, the hospitals that would make people want to live in these places and end this cycle of violence. But let's just be clear, because people say, well, are you saying there should be one state? The answer is, yeah, there should be one state, but we can't take, 2.5 million Palestinians that live in Judea and Samaria and all of a sudden say, hey guys, guess what? We're going to give you the opportunity demographically to do what you couldn't do militarily. The point is respecting the dignity of human life. That's really what this is about. Give them every opportunity within their communities to have self-governance on civil matters, on zoning matters, on school matters. And by the way, look, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, all the neighbors, right? What's their GDP per capita? $3,000, $4,000? What's Israel? $50,000. I mean, Israel is the only nation where these people have a chance, okay, if they can live in peace with Israel, to be prosperous. I mean, and look at the Arab citizens of Israel. They have the best quality of life.
So all right. So lay it out in a couple of bullet points. The Friedman vision, the roadmap is what specifically? Boom, boom, boom.
Israeli sovereignty over all of Judea and Samaria. Okay. Permanent residency for the Palestinians who live there. What does that mean? It means they can't be kicked out of their homes. It means they have the right to live there. It means they can get travel documents that enable them to leave the country. Again, subject to
security checks,
so all the security that, and a large infusion of capital, from our new friends in the region to help make this area an area that's worth living in for Jews and
but not voting rights.
Not voting rights. I mean, the Arabs who live in Israel will keep their voting rights.
They can vote for a mayor in their area or something.
They have all the...
But not national voting rights?
Not for the Palestinians, but for the Arab Israelis, they have the right now. They would retain that right.
Okay.
Look, it's the best way to absorb 2.5 million people, into an environment which enables them to live a better life. Remember, they have no leadership that they have any faith in. They don't want a Palestinian state because they know that will be corrupt.
Okay. We only have a moment. This is the Ambassador David Friedman vision. But you were the point man for your dear friend and the former president, who is on a pretty good track right now, not only to win the Republican nomination, but to be the next president of the United States. So the question becomes, is this his vision?
Well, it's not his vision yet. I mean, we haven't had a chance to really.
Right?
That's
your plan?
If he asks me my advice, and I like to think he values my advice, this will be my advice. And I think that, would
you want? I mean, if he asked, obviously you would serve at his pleasure. But would you want to go back in the administration? Do you want to help shape policy there?
Of course, course. Well, I mean, he's a dear friend. He's been a leader like Israel has never had in the Oval Office. His ability...
No, America has not had a leader quite like
America's
anything like him.
What he brings to the Middle East, and it's especially important there, not only does he have the wisdom, which a lot of people are smart, and a lot of people have good ideas, but he has the courage and the fortitude and the strength to implement policy in the Middle East, where if you don't have that, you just can't get anything done.
Upon taking office, I will create a new federal task force on fighting anti-Christian bias. It's become a very big term, anti-Christian bias. Not believable that you have a term like that, is it? When you think about it, it's like, where did that come from? And it's a very recent phenomenon. Its mission will be to investigate all forms of illegal discrimination, harassment, and persecution against Christians in America. As president, I will once again appoint rock-solid conservative judges in the mold of Justices Antonin Scalia and the great Clarence Thomas, who's doing a phenomenal job. Strong. I will stand proudly with our friend and ally, the State of Israel. We will stand proudly with Israel. In our first term, I kept my promise, recognized Israel's eternal capital. That was a big thing. But the biggest thing I did, in my opinion, the biggest thing was I withdrew from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal that Israel never wanted. Now, the problem is that the Biden administration did nothing. We could have made any deal we wanted. That deal was done. Iran was broke, totally broke. They had no money because I said anybody buying oil from Iran is not doing any business in the United States, right? And China stopped. They all stopped. They were doing no business. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for anything. They were totally broke. And we could have made any deal we wanted. No more nuclear weapons. You cannot let them have a nuclear weapon. And we were all set to do it. But the Biden administration didn't take advantage of it. And they didn't take advantage of the weakness at that time of Iran. So when I got out, Iran went about selling oil at levels they've never hit before. China went back to buying. India went back to buying. France went. They all went back to buying. Everybody was buying. And now Iran has $235 billion. They made it over the last 3 years. $235 billion. Iran is a very rich country right now. And what a shame. It was a great time. We could have negotiated any deal. We don't want to hurt anybody, but we just don't want them to have a nuclear weapon, because when they have a nuclear weapon, very bad things are going to happen.